the point where the handle meets the blade, right? The bolster. Right, wrap your grip around here. Stand with a posture that's 45 degrees to the table so that the knife and your belly is not in the way of your cutting. Cut with the knife perpendicular to the length of the table and with the edge straight up and down. And that's easier said than done, and something that sometimes requires feedback from someone else to help you learn, because it's very comfortable for people to lay the knife out this way, and then because they can see the cutting edge. The difficulty with that is twofold. One, you can't see the production side of the knife, which is over here. The thing you're wanting to cut is on the hidden blind side of the knife. The other side is now the blade edge is perfectly angled to remove your fingertips. So what you want to do is stand the knife upright, right? And then cut. And when you cut, you want to cut squares. Ideally, you cut squares because then you have a consistent size and shape of food that cuts at a consistent pace, that cooks rather, at a consistent pace.
So squares, you mean like it's perpendicular to the board, or?
All of the above, right? The idea is that you're cutting cubes in the end, and onions sort of do you favors by being partially cut anyway. But what you want is for all of these pieces to be more or less the same size so that they cook at more or less the same pace. There's nothing worse than putting in onions in a pan and there are a whole bunch of different sizes, and some things start to burn and other things are still kind of crispy. So the basics beyond that, beyond posture and how to hold the knife, are that every sort of vegetable still follows a basic fundamental rule that we're going to cut. Planks, right? Broad, flat planes. Then we're going to cut those planes or those planks into sticks, and then we're going to cut those sticks into cubes. And so with an onion, I want to, because it's already partially cut, it has all of these natural segments, I want to cut it so that the root remains attached and it holds it all together. And then when I cut, I want to keep the root sort of still intact. So rather than cutting all the way through, letting the knife go all the way beyond the edge of the onion, I want to sort of stop about there so that this whole thing is sort of backstopped and holds its shape. The challenge with onions is that because it's partially cut, it wants to fall apart. So the first thing I want to do is bisect some of these vertical segments here. So I'm going to cut perpendicular, parallel to the tabletop here, and with a light pressure on the top so it doesn't move, I want to use a slicing motion to push the knife about, what is that, 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the onion. And in that way I've cut these guys into the shape that I want. Rotate the onion so that the root is away from you. The knife should be basically at a right angle to the growth of the onion from the root to the tip. And then I'm going to cut using this hand as a guide. So I want to touch the onion here, and I want the knife to touch my hand here. And in doing so, the knife is super stable because it's stabilized by being basically grounded to the earth. If I don't have a guiding hand, or if I sort of am timid about it, I have fairly steady hands, but it's still not perfect, right? So the idea is that you stabilize it here and use it like a miter box if you're a carpenter, you know what I mean?
And
So,
Tucker, are you using one of your fingers, or are you using
I'm using my knuckle. My knuckle should be proud here, because if I lay it out flat, then I'm apt to hook into the fingernail, and believe me, it's been done. Right, exactly. So I want to.
It's just your one knuckle. It's not
one
a couple
knuckle here,
knuckles.
right? So I want to sort of like I'm holding a small racquetball sized. Right, that's about my hand size. So I want to hold it here with my thumb at the back. With my thumb at the back and my fingers forward. I don't want to hold it here because then my thumb may come underneath the edge of the knife. So thumb back, knuckle sort of proud, and then using the knuckle, right, as basically a guide, I want to slice into the onion, right? And slicing is the key term. I want to actually use the cutting edge of the knife and not a forced downward motion like a chop. When you chop, you actually bruise and crush the tissues of the onion, and you cry more because now you're releasing a lot of the juices. If you actually use the sharp cutting edge of the knife, you're going to find that you're going to cry less.
Now, in your cutting, Tucker, do you use that slicing motion most of the time, more than the straight up and down chop?
I use the slicing motion almost exclusively, and there's a lot to that there's a lot of benefit from it. There's almost no benefit from a chopping motion that I can sort of think of. Slicing means that you're more in control of the end result because the slicing motion is easier, it requires less force, so there's less strain on your hand and your wrist. And even in sort of knife traditions like using a Chinese cleaver, you never really see Martin Yan simply chopping with a straight down motion. It's always a forward motion or a backward motion along with downward. Right. And in that way the edge does the work rather than your muscles. And you get less tired.
And really you can cut better with a less sharp knife.
Absolutely, yeah. A slicing motion means that it's not so dependent upon the sharpness of the blade. And so the other lesson that comes with time is consistency and being able to sort of see a consistent, accurate sort of width and measurement. And I would give myself about a B+ here rather than an A. So once I've cut a series,
is that how the report cards come out at the CIA? Do you get like A, B+ for consistency?
We give numerical marks. We give numerical marks. So now what I want to do is, and you'll notice I was able to sort of cut across the width here because my body's no longer in my way and I have a full range of motion here, whereas if I stood square to the table I may be sort of confined or have to rotate the tip of the knife to cut across the whole vegetable, which means, again, that instead of cutting little cubes, I'm cutting wedge-shaped pieces, or that I have to roll the tip around as I move my hip out of my own way. So if I move my body out of the way, now I suddenly have a range of motion where I can cut. And I've cut with the knife in this sort of perpendicular length of the table, so now I have nice visual references for nice and square and sort of cubed. So once I've cut all of these basic planks, I'm going to rotate it, and because the sticks are already cut for me, because an onion does me all these favors, I can cut things into cubes. And the idea is that I'm cutting perpendicular, right? So old geometry terms, to I'm going to cut perpendicular to the first series of cuts, right? And a slicing motion again. So either forward or backward motion of the knife means that the cutting edge does the work for you rather than a downward sort of force. To make sure that we get everything, I'm going to cut here as well. And then the only waste is the little bit of root there. And if accuracy is your goal, you go slowly. If speed is your goal, you go quickly. And cutting quickly is a skill best reserved after accuracy is built. So,
sure. But that is really what separates the pro from the novice, isn't it? Speed and accuracy.
Speed and accuracy, and speed cutting I can demonstrate, and there's almost no analogy to the method if you're talking about, and I'm breaking every rule in the book, right? So you peel everything first and then you cut. Cutting with accuracy in mind is really about using your eye and making every cut look and making every cut look the same. When you're cutting for speed, primarily you're sort of using your hand or your knife like a metronome, and then you're trying to get a feel for when and where the knife is going to strike for the next cut. So if you're cutting an onion, stupid paper, for speed's sake, cut there. The idea is that you're going to lift the knife and drop the knife and retract your finger in a steady sort of metronome-like fashion. So you're going to lift here and cut. Right, so it's about a smooth backward motion and a steady metronome-like sort of fall of the knife means that all your cuts are more or less the same size and shape. So if I were making soup and I'm going to puree all of this stuff and the size is not important, then that's more the technique that you would do. But if it were, the onion were to appear in its in its final form, visually in the food, you'd want to try to cut for a little bit more accuracy. So take your pick. In general, you'll find that most people in the back of house are cutting for speed and for accuracy all at once. So you have
What was the grade on that one?
not too bad. Still a B.
B.
It's hard to talk. Now I'm making a mess of your shot. Again, minimize waste and maximize efficiency. Right? So if everything's the same size, then everything is usable. So when we're teaching young students, they get fairly upset when it's not the right size and shape, so they begin culling out the pieces that they don't like that are the wrong size or the wrong shape, and then they end up with a little tiny piece of keepers, a little tiny pile of keepers, and a big giant pile of discards. And they get frustrated because they're so slow, and the difficulty there is that their yield is so poor, and they get so little of it that's usable that they have to cut so much more just to get the assignment done. As accuracy improves, then their time spent in the task diminishes tremendously. So.
Awesome.
Very nice.
Okay, round one.
Round one. All right.
Awesome, Tucker. That was cool.